Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Katie Palisol. I'm the General Manager of the UK for Politico. So thank you for joining for our last session in the pub here. And I also want to say a huge thank you to the University of Liverpool for helping and supporting the session and also the pub. The pub's been a really fun experience. I hope you've all really enjoyed yourselves, and we hope to bring it back next year. So I'm going to hand over to Tim Jones from the University of Liverpool.
Thank you very much, and a pleasure to be here and welcome you to this event. My name's Tim Jones. I'm Vice-Chancellor at the University of Liverpool, and I'm looking forward to a fascinating conversation that's going to take place with the Secretary of State for Education. Now, as a Vice-Chancellor, I see every day how important universities are to helping to solve many of the challenges that have been discussed over the course of the past 2 days at this conference. And as major institutions, educational institutions, were already committed to the 5 challenges that you presented to us about a year ago, actually, when you took over as Secretary of State, particularly around the importance of growth, providing opportunity, and the important role that we play in our regions, in our civic responsibilities. The University of Liverpool is very proud of its history. It's a civic university, a major civic university, founded nearly 150 years ago. And our mission, the advancement of learning and ennoblement of life, I think is as relevant today as it was when we were founded 150 years ago. We open up opportunities, and this year we took record numbers of talented first-generation students from all backgrounds. They joined us this September, just last week. In research, we're pushing the boundaries of science and innovation, particularly in materials discovery through the use of artificial intelligence, in life sciences, in infection resilience, in therapeutics, and much more. And we work very closely with the Mayor, Steve Rotherham, and his team in driving that important innovation agenda. And in our civic and economic role, we're proud to be the second largest employer in the city of Liverpool, after the NHS. We have a turnover, and you may be surprised to know this, which is almost as large as both Liverpool and Everton football clubs combined. Just think about that. So we contribute nearly £750 million to the local economy. So our universities, we are one of many great universities, and our universities already deliver the highly skilled graduates essential for our future workforce. The research we all carry out is essential for helping to drive innovation and economic growth, and in fact supporting foreign direct investment into our cities and regions. And international higher education exports are worth over £30 billion to the UK economy each year. That makes us a bigger export success than sectors such as telecommunications and aircraft manufacturing. And again, I suspect many people don't know that. So I'm delighted to see you all. I look forward to this conversation. Thank you to Politico for bringing this discussion together. And I'll now pass you on to the Secretary of State, Right Honourable Bridget Phillipson MP, and the moderator, our moderator, Anne McElvoy. So welcome. Thank you.
Bridget. Right. Great, you could join us. If you put off having dinner, have you actually eaten anything all day?
Today I've actually eaten twice, would you believe?
That's
which
a
a conference
achievement.
compared to yesterday where I didn't eat at all, basically.
Exactly. It's not exactly what the doctor ordered, is it? Well, we're very thrilled to have you here. It has been, of course, the day of the big speech. Let me just start you off on that and say, look, you know, leaders' speeches, there's 2 audiences. There's the hall, at least 2 audiences, but principally the hall, and then those beyond it, you're watching, and you say on their television or on their screens or however they're getting information now. We came into it with a lot of speculation about Keir Starmer's future. Do you think he'd sort of faced up to past weaknesses and gaps in Starmerism and tried to deal with it today? You know, what do you think he'd learned?
I thought it was a really powerful speech. It really felt that it was from the heart, that he really meant what he was saying, particularly where it comes to taking on reform and his sense of pride in our country, both our history but also what we're going on to achieve as a country. And I think that hope and optimism was needed because, you know, there's a lot we need to change. There's a lot to do, but I do think the message I've heard also loud and clear here from party members is that there is a real sense of pride in what we have achieved over the last year. They want us to do more. They're impatient for change, as are we all. But it was a phenomenal list of achievements that the Prime Minister set out, but also a clear dividing line between our approach and that of reform.
You know, turning to your own position now in the deputy leadership race, we've got hustings tomorrow, I think, and then we've got ballots going out on the 8th, and it's all getting quite helter-skelter. You could say, well, that's a great answer, but that's the answer of a loyalist. That's Bridget Phillipson, one of the a fine member of the cabinet. She's got to be nice, because that's kind of part of the job. You have a challenger, Lucy Powell, who's positioned herself as somehow now a bit of an outsider. She lost a job recently as leader of the Commons. She can say, perhaps a bit more authentically, well, I'm not kind of tied into this this compulsory loyalty. What's your answer, Bridget?
Well, I think if you have conversations with members around conference here in Liverpool, they want this Labour government to succeed. So they want unity, they want a sense of purpose. I mean, of course, there have been mistakes along the way. I've been the first to admit them. But are there enormous achievements in terms of things we have done? Yes, absolutely, things that are in line with our values. And, whether it's expanding free school meals to 500,000 more children, the 30 hours of government-funded childcare that the Prime Minister talked about, our new school-based nurseries, those are all areas that I've led on, where I had to fight tooth and nail for those commitments. And I think anyone who knows me will know I'm very much my own person. I've always championed the cause, for example, of child poverty. I've been at that for many, many months, leading the work that we're doing in government. It's what brought me into the Labour Party. But I do think what I can bring as Deputy Leader is the voice of members to the Cabinet table, the voice of our movement at the Cabinet table, and you will have seen the strong endorsement and support I've secured from many of our big trade unions. I think I can do both of that together, bring members' voices directly to the Cabinet table. I won't be throwing stones from the outside. I'll be there when the decisions are made, able to get things done.
Bit of stone throwing going on social media, isn't there? So, recap for those who've missed some of the episodes to date. Lucy Powell, had a pop in an Instagram post. She said what you had said was ill-advised because you seemed to suggest that the choice was between you, for probably some of the reasons you just raced us through there, and others, and distractions, infighting, and noise. She said she thought that was ill-advised. Did you go a bit too far?
I mean, there is a certain irony in suggesting that, given that she appears to be saying we should be having a debate, but then when I have a debate, that's apparently a problem. I mean, I think there's an inconsistency in that argument there. What I'd also say is that divided parties don't win elections. We know that from our history. We won last July because we stood and fought together as a party. That's what members want. And I think particularly coming out of what has been a really good and strong conference for us, with the speech from the Prime Minister today, members do want to see that. But also, how on earth are we going to fight and beat reform if we're fighting amongst ourselves? That's not to say we don't air those concerns. That's not to say we don't have fierce debate. There's been plenty of it here this week, including in all of the fringes that take place.
And here at the Politico pub.
And here too.
So on brand.
And here too. But the difference is that I'll be in a position to actually influence those decisions at the Cabinet table. And, we had Angela Rayner doing a brilliant job as Deputy Leader, a campaigning Deputy Leader, but she was running a big government department. And what made Angela so effective was the combination of those two. That would apply to John Prescott, to Harriet Harman. The kind of suggestion that somehow those people were basically part-timers, that appears to be the implication. I think it's a bit insulting to what they've achieved.
I mean, it doesn't sound like your relation's going to be great with Lucy Powell after this. You just described it as insulting.
Well, I'm really proud of what Angela has achieved, what John achieved, what Harriet achieved, and they did that from government. I mean, this isn't personal. It's just a fact, to be honest. I got on really well with Lucy. We were working closely together at the Cabinet table until pretty recently, so it's not personal. I think it's just, this is about the future of our party, but it's actually about the future of our country. We've got a huge fight in our hands. As the Prime Minister said today, we've got to focus on that. The last thing we need is kind of infighting.
Well, I mean, let me just say, as Lucy Powell isn't in the room, let's sort of just try to channel what, her argument seems to me to be, which is, well, you've already got cabinet. I mean, it's Macbeth, right? You've got Glamis and Cordine. Maybe you will be Macbeth hereafter. Who knows where this will take you? It's a funny old world with leadership. But you therefore need another stream of opinion, of advice, of frankness, that maybe members who they know in modern politics, cabinet does have to take collective responsibility. You can't just always say exactly what's in your heart and mind, and that's maybe not an unreasonable position to have. That's maybe why you have deputy leader of the Labour Party as opposed to, say, merging it with deputy prime minister.
I mean, it's usually been the case in our party that the deputy leader has had a role in government. And as I say, I think the key difference is that when we're having those discussions, whether it's about child poverty or any other issue that really matters to Labour Party members, as it does to me, I will be there to make that argument, to give voice to members' concerns at the cabinet table, but also our wider movement. And the reason I've secured such strong backing from many of our trade unions is because of my track record in government of getting things done together with them, delivering for working people, a commitment around the Employment Rights Bill, all of the work that we've done, for example, around school support staff and much more besides. They see me as someone who's pragmatic, who will get things done and who will find solutions and answers to problems.
And you don't think that could come across as a bit like a machine politician? Yes, you drive it through. Yes, you make the deals that you need to do that. When she talks, and Andy Burnham had a sort of similar language. You can have a quick word about Andy Burnham if you like, because it's been a long time since we talked about, a day since we talked about Andy Burnham. But there was a whole this is a critique not just, and certainly not just of you, Bridget Phillipson, but it was about the vibe, the way cabinet works, the mood in Number 10. I suppose you could say, yeah, I'm efficient, but it's a little bit Soviet, isn't it? The party and the government's the one thing, but maybe pluralism could have a claim here. I just wonder if you understand that argument.
So I think, first of all, there have been things we've got wrong in this first year of a government, and I hold my hands up to that. We've both been part of a cabinet where things haven't always gone as well as they should have done, whether that's around welfare reform, the winter fuel allowance. There have been challenges, of course. There have been challenges.
Do you think you should have spoken up more on those things in cabinet?
I make my views known on topics, but I do that in the way that I should as a member of the cabinet, and that actually leads to positive outcomes. It's why, we're taking action on child poverty, why we've expanded free school meals. That's my record of getting things done.
Sorry, I should let you finish.
No, sure. Alongside that, the Labour Party is a machine. We're there to win elections. I'm not going to hide from that. The Labour Party was founded to advance the interests of working people. We only do that if we win elections. If that means being ruthless, efficient, focused on what we need to do, then, yeah, guilty.
Right, asked and answered. But we should move on to something that's not just the race. But last thought, I presented a poll here with Sam Coates, my partner in crime on politics at Sam and Anne's, the podcast, and we were quite surprised actually by the number of undecideds in this race. I think it was approaching 30%. Now you are behind Lucy Powell, but there are undecideds. So you've kind of set out your stall, but she did start in front. Is there anything that you've witnessed as the race has gone on that you think, well, actually I need to sort of change something, or maybe do a bit of extra listening?
I think it shows that it's all to play for, that there are lots of members who've still to make up their mind. I'll be touring the length and breadth of the country making that argument to our members. I've already been to every nation and region kind of within 10 days of announcing I was going to stand in this contest. I've got a track record of campaigning. I look forward to the campaign, and I'll be setting out to members how I'm best placed to unite our party, take the fight to reform, and be that voice at the cabinet table, and I get things done.
You think you're going to win?
I'm in it to win it.
That's a different
Well, I'm not in the business of making predictions, but I am gaining support increasingly amongst members, but also I think you see the support that I've secured from across the movement.
I think you should have an omerta about social media interactions. Did it get a bit out of control?
I don't think there's anything wrong with my social media.
Okay. Andy Burnham, thoughts?
Has he said anything of any particular? No. In the recent last day or so, nothing more to add.
I think he said he had reservations about digital ID cards, which is quite a sort of pillar of Keir Starmer's reforms.
Yeah, well, it's nice.
But whatever. Right. So let's talk a bit about some policy announcements which got into the speech, and actually was unusually for a policy announcement, just dropped into the speech without a lot of trailing. The Prime Minister saying scrapping Tony Blair's target of 50% of young adults into higher education. You'll remember that. I mean, we both sort of came through that, that kind of a Blair era where that was very much something, Blair clearly believed in. He thought this would upskill, it would equip young Britons to face a better future, and that was needed. Well, not only did Keir Starmer say, I'm going to do something else, but he kind of said this is not what we need for now, and he wanted much more focus on what he called gold standard apprenticeships, whoever awards the golds, that's quite an important question there. But nearly 800 million going to 16 to 18 education next year from the existing spending review settlement, including, keep with me, 14 new technical excellence colleges. Now, it sounds a bit like this is a reallocation of resources within your budget, albeit with a different philosophy. So, is that really enough to be a game changer?
So, moving towards what the Prime Minister announced today in his speech was the intention behind our spending review settlement, which is to make sure we've got enough money going into our further education colleges, enough money to create brilliant training opportunities and apprenticeships for young people. But what we've also got in parallel was the announcement that I made yesterday about maintenance grants, new targeted maintenance grants for students. And when I say students, I don't just mean university students. This will also apply to college students doing technical and vocational courses at levels 4 to 6. So it's both of those things together. And I think it does, going back to the start when you talked about the Blair era target around university, that was of its time, because at the point at which Labour formed that government back in 97, the numbers of young people going to university were far below that point, even lower when you took into account young people from working class backgrounds. We've obviously seen big steps forward in that regard. What we need now is there to be great routes, both on the technical and vocational side, alongside university routes for our young people, but also the chance for adults throughout their lives to get on, to upskill, to retrain. And this addresses the gap in the education system that's been there for a long time, where we're weaker than many of our international comparators like Germany, who've got a much stronger technical offer.
And if you're from the university sector, we were introduced by the University of Liverpool before we took the stage. You might be a bit worried about this, particularly as we know the university sector is having problems. It's seen an exodus of foreign students. It's not been able to adjust for that. A lot of cost models are suffering. You might also think, well, you're just going to come under pressure from this to sort of turn yourself into a 2-year kind of qualification machine. Is this a problem for the university sector?
Well, I would hope what the university sector will have seen over the course of the last year is that I've prioritised, financial sustainability in the sector, the decision to increase tuition fees, the first time that had happened in 7 years. But I also think the part that has to run alongside it is more support for students from less well-off backgrounds. And that's what I'm doing through the introduction of maintenance grants. We'll pay for that through the International Students Levy. So I think it is right that we do it in that way. But I do recognise, and we just heard there about the University of Liverpool, the amazing contribution that our universities make to our towns and cities, to our regional economies, to growth, to opportunities for adults and young people alike. I want to make sure that they're there for many, many years into the future, and financial sustainability is a critical part of that.
Let's talk about schools, because that's obviously very much at the heart of your brief. When we go back to term time from this, I don't know if you can call this a holiday, but it feels like it's a bit different from the day job in the department. Has the Chancellor given you the cash to roll out the breakfast clubs? I know that's really the policy you're very strongly personally associated with and have driven forward. It's one of the policies we've heard about a lot this week of, come on, give Labour credit, has done some things that were not there before under quite straightened financial circumstances. Now, you've announced 2,000 more schools to join those from next April. 80 million funding is available. We hear a lot, if you're around and you talk to schools, cover the sector, or actually just talk to a lot of people who have to deliver this, that they worry it won't be delivered in full, and they're also just worried that, although it sounds like a lot of money, but when you get down to the community, to the schools levels, it's not enough for what they would like to do to be in line with your policy.
So we do want to get the rollout right, and that's why we didn't just move to a full rollout. We did the first 750 early adopters to test the funding model to make sure schools are able to deliver it, with support around how they might manage the staffing in terms of breakfast clubs. So we'll learn from that as we move to the national rollout in April and then September next year. That will be the start of the national rollout. But, free breakfast clubs are being, it's absolutely transformative for working families. And I visited one last week in Kettering, one of the seats that we won at the general election. 100 children coming through the door at the start of the day in a community where there are significant challenges and quite high levels of child poverty. It means parents can get off to work. It means they can work more hours if that's what they choose. But also the educational impact is really clear, and the head teacher was telling me the difference it made to children ready to learn as they start the school day. They've had a breakfast, they've had time to settle in with their friends, something that's also really important for children with SEND. So I am confident we will make this work, and I think it is, it's a game changer for families.
I guess I was going to ask you about SEND, didn't you, before we start maybe to go out to the floor. Will you bring forward the reform of provisions for children with special education needs and disabilities? The entire system seems to be very creaky. National Audit Office saying it's financially unsustainable under severe strain. Now, one of the reasons for that, when we did our sort of box set of more policy study things over the summer, one of the things I think both Sam and I were interested to dive into was the extent to which this extending of legal rights to pupils and parents to get into this category has just overwhelmed the system. So are you going to remove those growing or curtail growing entitlements?
The driving principle behind all of the reform that we're setting out is about better outcomes for children with SEND, which are not as good as they should be. This is about improving rights, not removing rights, and a real focus on how we deliver better mainstream inclusion, specialist provision in mainstream, and making sure we've got the specialist placements for children with more complex needs. This is
But if more people, because greater awareness, but also, would you accept that there is a degree of kind of muddiness about diagnosis and even diagnosis creep that has put more people into this pot that you now then have to, to distribute, and that's very, very difficult?
I think diagnosis is and will remain an important part of the system, but what we need to do better is deliver support before formal diagnosis takes place. Better support and training for staff to do that, to identify where children are struggling, and quicker access for parents to specialist provision where that's needed. But I would say alongside that, there are many schools that are already doing this really well. We've got a lot of work underway. This isn't going to be, a big kind of one-off change. This has to be a process of reform where we build up the system, build up parents' confidence, continue to invest in rolling out that brilliant provision alongside longer-term change. And I know that any talk of change can cause worry for parents. I understand that, and I take that incredibly seriously. And that's the last thing I want is for parents to worry about what's to come. But no one looking at the system right now would think it's delivering good outcomes for children. That's my focus, and that's why we will be setting out further changes through the school's white paper. But why I'm also spending a lot of time speaking to parents, to campaigners, to education experts, to disability rights groups, to make sure that they have a voice in all of this and that we get it right.
It's a pub. Let's throw it open to this this raucous bar. Lazy at the raucous bar. If you just give me a little wave, if you'd like to come, we can have you for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Right, off you go.
Hi, Bridget. Fellow North Eastern Labour member here, but also Scottish Labour candidate for 2026, which is why I want to ask as Deputy Leader how will you work with Scottish Labour and what do you have to offer Scottish Labour? But also we've seen under the SNP education standards falling. Scotland used to be a world leader. Me and my Scottish husband used to have huge arguments about English and Scottish education, but we've seen Scottish education falling under the SNP. And whatever Labour suggests, SNP then copies. How can we fight that? How can we deal with that in the year to come?
So, through the work that I've been doing as Education Secretary, I think we can draw a contrast in terms of the difference that Labour is making in Westminster and where the Nationalists are not making progress in Scotland. Free breakfast clubs, for example, the government-funded childcare that we're introducing not available to families in Scotland in the same way. And that's something I've talked about a lot with Pam Duncan-Glancy, our amazing education spokesperson who I work with really closely. And I think that's my message. I do already work really closely with our colleagues in Scotland. I was up there last week. I've been up there many, many times over the years, including in the general election and, dare I talk about it, the referendum campaign back when. So, and we've always had strong links between the North East and Scotland, so I think I'm well placed to do that, to work with Annas and Scottish colleagues going into those crucial elections in May. And actually, my granddad was also educated for most of his life in Scotland and used to always tell me as a kid about how Scotland, led the world really in terms of access to education. And to see how far things have slipped, that huge attainment gap that the Nats have presided over, I think we really have to challenge them on.
You've got
come to North East 5? I'll be happy to show you
you've got County Durham and Houghton and Sunderland here up on this stage. There's a massive diversity. County Durham and the North East quite well represented on this stage tonight. Yay! Who else has got a question? Yeah, Mason. I mean, he's one of us, but he's not bad.
The Prime Minister's talked a lot about the politics of grievance today. Is there any sense that your leadership rival has a bit of an axe to grind after being sacked from the cabinet, rather?
I'm not going to speak for Lucy. I mean, we've always got on well. It's a good contest. We'll take it on its merits. Members can make their judgments.
How would you work together afterwards? I mean, I say that seriously in the sense that if you were to win, what kind of role would you expect Lucy Powell to play?
Lucy's, a great colleague. We've worked together closely. Whatever the outcome of the contest, what we both want is the Labour government to succeed.
You can't see a sort of role being created or something that would acknowledge that there'd been, this debate.
We're getting a few steps down the line into hypotheticals. That wouldn't be for me anyway.
I'm getting steps down there. That's literally Politico. Anyone? Last question. Anyone in the? Sorry, I can't see very well. I've got long saying hello. Is that Sasha?
It is.
Hey, I can see you because you. Very good to see.
Bridget, you talked about how much respect you have for Angela Rayner and the contribution she made to government. Both Wes Streeting and Lucy Powell said, we need Angela back. Do you think you need Angela Rayner back?
That, of course, it's for the Prime Minister to make decisions about who is in or out of the government. I worked really closely with Angela, particularly on areas around children's social care. She was an incredibly effective Secretary of State with a real focus on the life chances of children in our country. She's got a lot to offer. I'd love to work with her again in the future, and I'm sure that's true of colleagues right across government and across the party.
You expect you to see her back here next year?
That really is a matter for the Prime Minister to make those decisions, but she's such a brilliant colleague, was always fantastic to work with and was really brilliant at pushing things through and getting things done.
Just one thing that I noticed, because we haven't talked about it much in the pub this week, and I just happened to be sort of reading around and I saw Lucy Powell had a word about it, and that's kind of along culture wars, identity, trans rights, etc. And she was at Fringe on Monday and asked whether she supported the EHRC, I can never say that, EHRC's interim guidance on trans issues after the Supreme Court ruling providing protection for women-only spaces. Obviously, that ruling went very strongly in that direction. Now, Lucy Powell suggested MPs should review the full guidance before it's published this year. That would obviously open the door to a change. It sounded like she was not fully convinced that the guidance was a fair and equitable solution to what's obviously a really tricky area, and probably people who would be identified as trans rights activists would be quite happy to hear that. What's your position here?
So I'm the Minister responsible for this policy area, and we had the interim guidance from the EHRC, but what has now followed is the Code of Practice that comes to me as Secretary of State that we'll review. We haven't long received it. It's an extremely long, lengthy document, 600 plus pages. It'll be reviewed thoroughly to make sure we're getting it to the right place. And then through that process, it has to be laid in Parliament, and there's a kind of parliamentary process to follow. So members of Parliament will have the chance to be involved in that. What I would just say is, I do believe it is important, following the Supreme Court ruling, that we provide for single-sex spaces on the basis of biological sex. That was the ruling from the Supreme Court. But what the ruling from the Supreme Court also confirmed was that trans people retain important rights around freedom from discrimination, prejudice, as one of the protected characteristics within that Act. I think it is worth emphasising that point, because no trans person should suffer ill treatment or discrimination because of who they are. And that is also why we're taking steps around hate crime against trans people, why we'll also bring forward a draft conversion practices bill with that will be fully trans inclusive. So this is about making sure that everyone in our society has the access to the provision they need, the services they need, and are treated with respect.
Well, look, I put the laptop down now, so therefore, this is all just between us, right?
I'm sure that's how it works. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a whole thing. We could tell you how that goes. So, just last quick fire round. What were you really bad at school?
Art.
Just
not my skill set.
Not the new. Yeah. All right. Is it not the new Da Vinci? And it's about, we've been doing, some of my colleagues are much better at these than I am, so you should probably come on in, is you've got a choice between two things. You can go down the pub. I'm sorry, it's going to be pretty limited. It's going to be Andy Burnham or Angela Rayner. Who's your night out?
Anne should be a good night out, wouldn't she?
Yeah. And Andy, well, also quite a good night.
I'm sure he would be, but I think she's good for a party.
And is there one drink in the spirit of the absent Angela Rayner, who, do you remember, she was a recipe for terrible cocktails and absolutely dreadful, but she sounded very enthusiastic about it. Is there one sneaky sort of drink that you might have on a Friday night that you think that's just that's what I have in my pub?
I'm always up for a Jaeger bomb if there's one going.
News! Jaeger bomb! Bridget Phillipson, Jaeger bomber.
Thank you.